History has a strange sense of humor. It always exposes who was lying the loudest. Think about it. In 1692, entire communities swore witches were flying on broomsticks, and not a single broom was ever presented as evidence. Fast forward to now, and human nature hasn't changed much. When people can't destroy you with truth, they'll invent theater, dress it up as fact, and pray the crowd believes their performance. The funny part? Their act requires no receipts, no files, no fingerprints, just volume and desperation. And yet here you are, standing taller than their rumors, untouched by their noise, proof that absence of evidence can sometimes scream louder than 1,000 accusations. This isn't just about survival. This is about what happens when the chosen one becomes the test that exposes everyone else's fear, envy, and insecurity. Buckle up, because today we're pulling the curtain back on why they went so far, so relentlessly and so recklessly, all without a shred of proof. Number one, their obsession was their confession. That single line explains more than their schemes, their rumors, or their failed attempts ever could. When people decide to dedicate their lives to plotting against you, it's no longer about you being wrong. It's about you being undeniable. Obsession is never neutral. It reveals what people fear the most, what they envy the most, and what they can't stop thinking about. If you were ordinary, they wouldn't care. If you were irrelevant, they wouldn't notice. But the very fact that they kept circling you like moths around a flame proves that your existence alone shook something inside them they couldn't control. Obsession is always louder than intention. They could claim it was about justice, about morality, or about exposing you, but their actions betrayed the truth. You became their compass, the center of their conversations, the topic of their meetings, the name they couldn't erase from their tongues. They weren't obsessed with lies, they were obsessed with you. That's the real confession. It means that no matter how much they pretended to hate you, they were secretly acknowledging your weight, your influence, and your unshakable presence in their world. Think about it. Nobody wakes up every day plotting against someone who doesn't matter. Nobody burns that much energy on what doesn't threaten them. By obsessing over you, they were shouting to the world, "This one matters." And the irony is, the harder they tried to hide it, the more obvious it became. Their moves exposed them. Their schemes exposed them. Their constant monitoring and desperate attempts revealed who they really were, insecure, threatened, and terrified that you would rise higher than they could reach. That's why their obsession wasn't just a failed attack. It was an unintentional confession of your greatness. They told on themselves without saying a word. Every false accusation was really a compliment in disguise, a way of admitting that your very existence made them restless. You didn't have to prove who you were. They did it for you, by making you the center of their obsession. And in the end, that's the one confession they could never retract, because the world saw it all play out in real time. Number two, they built a case without evidence because you were the evidence. That truth cuts deeper than anything they tried to frame against you. Proof wasn't necessary for them because your life itself stood as the undeniable testimony they couldn't accept. Every step you took, every achievement you made, every door you walked through, all of it was enough to shake their fragile foundations. You didn't need to be caught in scandal or wrongdoing for them to panic. The crime, in their eyes, was simply existing at a level they couldn't reach or control. This is why their attacks looked so desperate. They weren't operating from facts, they were operating from fear. It wasn't about what you did, it was about who you were. Your presence was too disruptive to their narrative, too threatening to the roles they had scripted for themselves. Instead of admitting that you outgrew the box they built for you, they decided to label you as dangerous, guilty, unworthy, all without a shred of proof. They weren't seeking justice. They were seeking a way to erase the living proof that someone like you could rise without their permission. And that's the irony. Their case fell apart because it was never about the details. It was about your essence. They wanted people to believe you didn't belong, but the more they pressed without evidence, the more obvious it became that you were standing on something solid. Real accusations come with facts. Real exposure comes with receipts. But when nothing tangible could be brought forward, all that remained was their jealousy laid bare. The truth is, they needed you to be guilty, not because you were, but because your innocence highlighted everything they lacked. You were walking proof that integrity, resilience, and authenticity could thrive in a world built on shortcuts, corruption, and lies. That was too much for them to stomach. So they built cases out of thin air, hoping the weight of repetition would outweigh the lack of truth. But no matter how many times they tried, the hollowness of their accusations kept echoing back louder. In the end, you stood as the evidence they couldn't erase. You didn't just survive their baseless case, you exposed it. And that made your existence the ultimate verdict. Unshakable proof that you were chosen. Number 3, they turned conspiracy into a career. That's the level of dedication they put into trying to take you down. It stopped being a side mission or a moment of pettiness. It became their full-time occupation. They poured hours, days, and years into inventing stories, aligning with others who shared their bitterness, and spinning webs that had no foundation. What makes it even more telling is that while you were busy building, growing, and moving forward, they were clocking in daily to a job that never paid them anything but frustration. Conspiracies thrive when there's no truth to anchor them. That's why they had to keep inventing new ones. One rumor wasn't enough. One accusation couldn't hold. So they kept producing lies like a factory, hoping quantity could substitute for quality. Their consistency wasn't proof of your guilt. It was proof of their obsession. They became employees of their own hatred, working overtime, hoping someone somewhere would finally believe the stories they manufactured. What they didn't realize is that turning conspiracy into a career comes with a cost. While they spent their energy constructing lies, they neglected their own lives. Every rumor they built took time away from their own growth, their own goals, their own chance to create something real. And that's where the tragedy lies. They didn't just fail to destroy you, they destroyed themselves by investing all their effort in a dead-end mission. The more elaborate their conspiracies became, the more obvious it was that they were reaching. Real truth is simple, clear, and undeniable. Lies are the ones that need layers, details, and performances to keep them alive. They had to keep rehearsing their lines, convincing each other of the script, and polishing their act just to keep their theater running. And the funniest part is, even with all that effort, it still collapsed under the weight of its own emptiness. By making conspiracy their career, they confessed that you were more important to their lives than they'd ever admit. They gave you the highest position in their world, the central focus of their time and energy. And in the end, that career path left them unemployed in the only thing that mattered: truth. Because the truth required no rehearsals, no conspiracies, no effort to prop it up. The truth stood on its own, and so did you. Number 4, lies are heavy. That's why they collapse without proof. No matter how carefully crafted they seem, every fabrication has an expiration date because it carries no real foundation. Truth stands on its own, but lies need constant maintenance, constant rehearsals, constant reinforcement, just to appear believable. Without evidence to hold them up, lies wobble, bend, and eventually break under the pressure of their own emptiness. This is exactly why their grand design didn't last. It was built on air, not stone. When people plot against you with falsehoods, they often underestimate how much energy it takes to keep a lie alive. They have to keep changing their stories, adjusting their claims, and creating new details to patch the holes in their narrative. Every adjustment makes the structure weaker, not stronger, because the inconsistencies begin to show. The weight isn't just in the lie itself, it's in the effort required to keep it afloat. And eventually, that weight drags the liar down more than it could ever damage the target. The beauty of truth is that it doesn't require backup. It doesn't need rehearsals. It doesn't fear scrutiny, and it doesn't collapse under questioning. Lies are the opposite. Fragile but heavy, hollow but exhausting. That's why their entire campaign against you unraveled. They could shout as loud as they wanted, but without proof their accusations were only echoes bouncing back on themselves. Their grand design fell apart because it had no skeleton, no spine, no structure of reality to hold it upright. They wanted people to see you as guilty, flawed, or unworthy, but their evidence was nothing but smoke. And smoke can fill a room for a while, but eventually it clears, and everyone sees who was holding the match. This is why their failure was inevitable. Lies can start with momentum and noise, but over time their weight reveals the truth. They can't sustain themselves. The louder they tried to keep the story alive, the heavier it became, until it caved in on itself. And when it collapsed, it didn't just expose the lie, it exposed them. The collapse was proof that you had already outlasted their fiction. Number 5. Their attack proved your impact. Nothing reveals your significance more clearly than the scale of the opposition you face. People don't gather armies against ghosts. Nobody wages a campaign against someone who doesn't matter. The intensity of their efforts to erase you was the clearest sign that you had already left a mark too deep to ignore. Their aggression wasn't random, and it wasn't trivial. It was a direct acknowledgement of your presence, your influence, and your ability to shift the ground under their feet. What they wanted most was for you to disappear quietly, but the very act of targeting you showed the opposite, that you had become unavoidable. Attacks don't happen in a vacuum. They're drawn to impact like vultures to movement. If you were irrelevant, you'd be invisible to them. They wouldn't waste their time, energy, or resources on you. The fact that they tried so hard was an unspoken confession of your importance. They were afraid not of what you might do, but of what you'd already done. Your work, your presence, your words, your choices, they had already shifted something in their world, disrupted their comfort, or exposed their weaknesses. This is why the attacks felt so relentless. They weren't just trying to stop you, they were trying to undo the effect you'd already had. And deep down, they knew it was too late. There's a strange kind of irony in all this. Every strike they launched, every rumor they spread, every plan they devised to erase you ended up amplifying your existence. The more they tried to erase you, the clearer you became. The more they tried to silence you, the louder your impact echoed. Attacks don't diminish real influence, they confirm it. So while they thought they were burying you, they were actually proving you'd already been planted. While they were trying to erase your name, they were engraving it deeper into the story. Their attack wasn't a sign of your weakness. It was a public announcement of your power. In the end, their efforts became the proof they couldn't fabricate. You mattered enough to fight, and you mattered too much to defeat. Number 6, they wanted blood but settled for noise. That's the clearest sign of how badly they needed your downfall, and how powerless they actually were. When real evidence exists, people don't need theatrics. They don't need to scream, exaggerate, or throw mud, hoping something sticks. But when there's nothing to hold on to, noise becomes the substitute for substance. That's exactly what happened here. The more they failed to bring proof, the louder they became, mistaking volume for validation and chaos for credibility. This isn't just a tactic. It's desperation. Noise is what people create when silence would expose the emptiness of their claims. They hope that if they shout long enough, repeat the same accusation enough times, or rally enough voices to echo them, it will feel real, even if it isn't. It's a psychological trick. Drown out the truth with clamor, hoping the crowd confuses sound with evidence. But sound fades, and when the noise dies down, all that's left is the silence of unproven claims. The irony is, their shouting only revealed their weakness. The more they screamed, the more obvious it became that they had nothing concrete. People with facts don't need to perform. Facts speak for themselves, but lies need an audience and an orchestra. They need drama, because drama distracts from the holes in the story. By going louder, they exposed themselves, showing that the accusations weren't built on truth, but on pure frustration. And here's the twist. The noise they thought would destroy you actually amplified you. Every headline, every rumor, every outburst pointed back to you, making you even more visible. The crowd they hoped to turn against you ended up seeing through the performance, because no matter how loud the noise got, no evidence ever appeared. Over time, that pattern spoke louder than their shouting ever could. They wanted your blood, but without proof, all they had was volume. And volume is a weak substitute for victory. The louder they became, the clearer it was. They couldn't take you down, only try to drown you out. But noise fades, truth endures, and in the end, their shouting only became an echo of their own defeat. Number 7. Power doesn't fear the guilty, it fears the untouchable. That's the real reason they went after you so relentlessly. Guilty people are easy to control. They're predictable, they're compromise-ready, and they always leave trails that can be used to keep them in line. But someone who's clean, someone who hasn't bent, hasn't been bought, and refuses to trade their integrity for influence, that's the one power can't manipulate. That's the one they see as dangerous. They didn't target you because you were corrupt. They targeted you because you weren't. Corruption is convenient. A corrupt person can be bribed, threatened, or silenced. A clean person can't, and that's what unsettled them. They couldn't find a weak point, a hidden sin, a private vice to hang over your head. They couldn't trap you in guilt or debt. You were the one thing they couldn't own, and in a world built on leverage, that made you a threat far greater than any crime ever could. This is why their attacks felt so ruthless. It wasn't about justice or accountability. It was about neutralizing what they couldn't control. Power thrives on compromise. Systems built on fear and manipulation can handle liars, cheats, and pretenders, because those people operate within the same rules. But someone who walks clean, someone who doesn't flinch at intimidation or sell out for a seat at the table, rewrites the rules simply by existing. That's what they saw in you. That's what they wanted to crush. The irony is that in trying to destroy you, they confirmed exactly what they were afraid of. Their inability to find dirt became its own evidence. Every failed attempt, every false accusation, every exaggerated claim only proved what they were trying to deny, that you were untouchable. And untouchable doesn't just mean clean. It means protected. It means someone's character is so intact that no lie can stick, no smear can hold, and no scheme can bury them. They didn't come after you because you were weak. They came after you because you were proof that power can be faced without fear, bought influence can be resisted, and corruption isn't inevitable. And nothing terrifies power more than that. Number 8, their campaign wasn't against you, it was against truth. That's the part most people miss when they watch situations like this unfold. On the surface, it looked like a personal attack, a coordinated effort to ruin your name, dismantle your credibility, and erase your influence. But at its core, it was never just about you. It was about silencing the reality you represented. You had become living evidence of something they didn't want the world to see, and their every move was aimed at burying that reality, not simply breaking you. When someone embodies truth, They disrupt systems built on illusion. Your presence alone exposed the cracks in their story, the contradictions in their claims, the hypocrisy in their positions. You didn't even have to shout it. Just by standing in integrity, you became a mirror that reflected what they were trying to hide. That's why the attacks were so persistent. It wasn't enough to question you. They needed to erase you completely because the truth you carried threatened the foundation of their narrative. Every failed attempt to destroy you was also a failed attempt to smother that truth. And that's why their efforts always looked so frantic and uncoordinated. They weren't fighting evidence. They were fighting exposure. They knew if they let your reality stand unchallenged, their lies, their schemes, and their facades would crumble in public view. So they dressed their fear up as outrage, their insecurity as concern, and their desperation as justice. But no matter how convincing the performance, the pattern kept revealing itself. They weren't chasing accountability. They were running from truth. And here's the thing about truth. It doesn't need defense, but it does demand confrontation. Every time they failed, it wasn't just proof of your resilience. It was proof that truth cannot be buried indefinitely. Their campaign became its own evidence. The harder they tried to distort reality, the clearer reality became. The more they tried to silence you, the louder the truth echoed through the gaps they left. So while it felt personal, it was far bigger than you. You were simply the vessel they couldn't corrupt, the embodiment of a reality they couldn't deny. And in the end, every attempt to destroy you only made the truth you carried impossible to ignore. Number 9, they confused silence with weakness. To them, your refusal to respond on their terms looked like surrender, but it was actually the one move they couldn't decode. They were operating in a world where power means shouting louder, fighting dirt with dirt, and meeting chaos with chaos. When you didn't engage, you disrupted the rhythm of their attacks. You refused to play by the script they had written for you, and that unsettled them more than any counterattack ever could. Silence in their eyes meant vulnerability. They thought it signaled fear, hesitation, or guilt. But in reality, it was a power move they couldn't recognize. Noise is predictable. Anger is predictable. Even denial is predictable. But holding your ground without giving them fuel, that's unpredictable. It left them spinning, guessing, and projecting, because they had no idea what your next step would be. You weren't passive, you were strategic. And strategy always outlasts impulse. Their mistake was thinking that not reacting was the same as not resisting. What they didn't see was how your silence stripped them of momentum. They couldn't build their lies around your words because you gave them none. They couldn't twist your reactions into evidence because you gave them nothing to twist. Your restraint exposed their chaos. The more you stayed grounded, the more they revealed themselves, loud, erratic, desperate. This is the paradox they couldn't grasp. Silence can be louder than shouting when it's backed by strength. Your refusal to be dragged into their arena didn't weaken you. It protected you. It gave you the distance to see their moves clearly, while they were too busy reacting to their own noise. Over time, your silence became the proof of your control, while their noise became the proof of their instability. In the end, what they read as vulnerability was actually composure. What they thought was retreat was actually discipline. And what they believed was weakness was in fact the quiet kind of strength that doesn't flinch, doesn't scramble, and doesn't lose its center. That's why they couldn't decode it. Because silence, when it comes from power, doesn't look like anything they've ever known. Number 10. False charges reveal real insecurities. Every accusation they hurled at you was never really about your actions. It was a mirror reflecting their own hidden fears, flaws, and frustrations. When people fabricate charges without evidence, they're not exposing your character, they're advertising theirs. They're projecting the parts of themselves they can't face, hoping to unload their guilt by painting you as the villain. That's why their accusations felt so bizarre and disconnected from reality. They weren't describing you, they were describing themselves. This is how projection works. A liar accuses others of dishonesty. A manipulator calls others controlling. Someone insecure about their position calls someone else a threat. It's easier to accuse than to admit. It's easier to attack than to reflect. By throwing accusations at you, they were hoping to redirect attention away from their own shortcomings. But in doing so, they left a trail of evidence about who they really were. Their words weren't confessions about you, they were confessions about themselves. That's why their charges crumbled so easily under scrutiny. Lies have no weight of truth behind them, and projections always collapse when reality steps in. The accusations didn't stick, not because you defended yourself perfectly, but because they were never rooted in fact to begin with. And every time an accusation fell apart, it exposed another layer of their insecurity. The pattern became obvious. Their claims weren't a window into your life, but a window into their fears. There's a deeper irony here. In trying to smear you, they only revealed how much they were battling within themselves. Their accusations became evidence, not of your guilt, but of their envy, resentment, or shame. What they tried to make your burden became their own undoing. Because over time, people notice when accusations always go one way, but evidence never follows. This is why false charges always backfire. They're projections, not truths. And when the dust settles, the person who tried to destroy your reputation ends up handing the world a map of their own insecurities. In the end, their accusations weren't about proving you wrong. They were about escaping their reflection. And that reflection always catches up. Number 11. They wanted you erased, but only highlighted you. That's the paradox they didn't see coming. Every plot, every trap, every whispered rumor was designed to make you disappear, to turn you into a cautionary tale, a forgotten name, a faded memory. But instead of erasing you, their efforts had the opposite effect. They made you impossible to ignore. With every move they made against you, they etched your presence deeper into the very story they were trying to write you out of. Attempts at erasure always reveal two things: fear and recognition. Fear, because they see something in you they can't control or compete with. Recognition, because they know deep down you've already carved out a space too significant to be removed. Their campaigns, instead of silencing you, became free advertising for your resilience. They dragged your name into every room, every conversation, every corner of their networks. The more they tried to bury you, the more people discovered you. It's the oldest irony of opposition. Attention is attention, even when it's meant to harm. Every smear made more people curious about who you really were. Every trap they set revealed more about their own intentions and less about yours. Even their anger became a spotlight, shining directly on the fact that you were unshakable. They tried to control the narrative but ended up amplifying the very person they feared. This is how influence works. It doesn't need perfection, it needs persistence. And your persistence outlasted their malice. They thought their schemes would erase your mark, but all they did was deepen it. They thought they were weakening your name, but they were chiseling it into stone. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were building your legacy. The truth is, you didn't need their approval to be remembered. They handed it to you on a silver platter. By making you the focus of their efforts, they broadcasted your significance louder than you ever could on your own. In trying to erase you, they became unwilling architects of your permanence. And now, long after their noise has faded, your name stands larger and clearer than it ever would have without their attempts. Number 12. They proved you were untouchable by touching nothing. The absence of proof wasn't just their failure. It was the clearest sign of your protection, a kind of divine fingerprint that no weapon formed against you could prosper. For all their planning, scheming, and desperation, they still came up empty-handed, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because there was nothing for them to hold. You were beyond the reach of their traps, beyond the stains of their accusations, beyond the limits of their control. This is what real untouchability looks like. It's not about never being targeted. It's about being targeted and coming out clean every single time. It's about accusations collapsing before they can take root, rumors fading before they gain traction, and traps snapping shut on nothing but air. They tried to find flaws and couldn't. They tried to manufacture evidence and failed. They tried to weaponize public opinion, and still, it slipped through their fingers. Their empty hands were the proof. There's a quiet power in this that they couldn't stand. Guilt can be planted. Lies can be rehearsed. But real protection, real favor, can't be manufactured, and it can't be faked. They had the motive, the energy, and the resources, but they didn't have access. That's why they resorted to noise, to rumors, to smoke and mirrors. When there's no evidence to present, the performance becomes the only weapon left. But even their performance worked against them. Every failed attempt only made your position clearer. Every accusation with no proof reinforced the same truth. You were untouchable. And not untouchable because you hid well or because they lacked skill, but because there was a covering on you that couldn't be breached. It was bigger than them. It was bigger than you. That's the part that infuriated them most. They thought persistence would break you, that enough repetition would stain you. But all they managed to do was expose themselves, to show everyone that even with everything in their arsenal, they still couldn't land a single blow. Their zero proof became your ultimate evidence. No weapon formed against you could prosper, because nothing formed against you could hold. Number 13. They tried to convict you in public opinion court. When the law couldn't hold you, when no evidence, no testimony, no charge could stand, they ran to the only place where proof isn't required: gossip. Public opinion became their courtroom, rumors their evidence, and outrage their verdict. They wanted the mob to crown them judge and executioner, because in that arena, perception is enough to destroy someone, even when reality can't. This is a tactic as old as power itself. When systems fail to condemn an innocent person, the manipulators turn to crowds, because crowds are easier to sway than courts. In a real courtroom, facts matter. In the court of public opinion, feelings matter. All they had to do was plant a story, twist a headline, or hint at wrongdoing, and let people's assumptions do the rest. It wasn't about justice. It was about creating enough noise to smear your name without ever proving a single thing. But there's a flaw in that strategy. Public opinion is volatile. It burns bright, but it burns out fast. The same crowd that's eager to judge can just as quickly grow suspicious when the accusations never add up. Over time, the lack of evidence becomes obvious. People begin to see the pattern: lots of noise, no receipts. And when that happens, the mob they tried to weaponize starts turning its attention back to the accusers, questioning why nothing ever sticks. This is where their plan backfired. They underestimated the power of truth over time. While they were rushing to convict you in the arena of gossip, you stayed grounded. You didn't give them extra fuel. You didn't give them more to twist. And because of that, their narrative began to unravel. In trying to destroy you without proof, they destroyed their own credibility instead. They thought they could substitute evidence with emotion, but emotion fades. They thought they could crown themselves judges, but the crowd refused to be their jury. And in the end, their public opinion court became their own trap, a stage where they revealed their malice and your endurance at the same time. Their attempt to convict you without proof only left one undeniable verdict. You were still standing, and they were still empty-handed. Number 14. The absence of proof became the proof. That's the irony of everything they tried to do. They threw everything they had at you, accusations, rumors, schemes, even attempts to twist reality itself, yet nothing stuck. With all their power, connections, and desperation, they still came up empty-handed. And that emptiness wasn't just a sign of their failure. It was the clearest evidence that you were operating on a level they couldn't touch. It revealed the ultimate verdict. You were chosen, protected, and beyond their reach. When people launch an all-out campaign to destroy someone, they usually find something, even if it's exaggerated or twisted. But with you, there was nothing to find. Every door they pried open led to a dead end. Every shadow they searched held no secret. That kind of clean slate doesn't happen by accident. It's not luck. It's a sign that the very ground they were standing on wasn't theirs to claim. They were fighting against something bigger than you, a protection they couldn't penetrate, and a destiny they couldn't derail. Their failure became its own kind of testimony. They wanted evidence of your downfall, but ended up creating evidence of your resilience. They wanted to prove your weakness, but only highlighted your strength. They wanted to show the world you could be destroyed, but instead showed the world you couldn't even be reached. Over time, that pattern became impossible to ignore. People started to see the truth for themselves. If you were guilty, they would have proved it by now. If you were fragile, they would have broken you by now. But you were still standing. This is why the absence of proof isn't just a gap. It's a statement. It speaks louder than any verdict, because it shows that even with all the force they could muster, they still couldn't touch what was meant to stand. Their attacks became your evidence, their failure became your testimony, and their frustration became your confirmation. In the end, their inability to take you down became the proof they were trying to deny. You weren't just surviving, you were protected. Not hidden, not lucky, protected. And protection is always the clearest sign of a purpose too powerful for anyone to erase. In the end, every attack, every smear, every baseless accusation, every desperate scheme, and every attempt to erase you only revealed the truth they couldn't face. You were untouchable. Their obsession became their confession, proving that you mattered more than they could bear to admit. Their fabricated cases without evidence exposed their fear, showing that your existence alone was enough to shake their world. They turned conspiracy into a career and exhausted themselves trying to undo what they could never control. Lies collapsed under their own weight, proving that nothing built on falsehood can ever endure. Every attack they launched only magnified your presence, carving your name deeper into history. Their failure to produce proof, their frantic attempts to manipulate public opinion, their projection of insecurities, all of it became the evidence of your resilience, your strength, and your untouchable essence. Power didn't fear your mistakes or your flaws. It feared your integrity, your unbreakable character, and the fact that no bribe, no threat, no scheme could compromise you. They tried to bury reality itself, but truth cannot be silenced. Silence, patience, and unwavering composure became your greatest weapons, while their noise revealed their desperation. The absence of proof wasn't their failure. It was the ultimate confirmation of your protection and your destiny. Every move they made against you became a mirror reflecting their own insecurities, and every plot designed to erase you only highlighted your existence. They wanted blood, but all they managed to create was a spotlight on your power. They tried to rewrite your story, but their efforts only strengthened it. And through it all, one undeniable truth emerged. You were chosen, protected, and operating on a level beyond their reach. So remember this: When they try to bring you down without proof, when their attacks feel relentless, and when the world seems to side with their noise, know that every failed attempt is a testament to your strength. Every whisper, every rumor, every scheme they launch becomes proof of your resilience and of the fact that you are untouchable. You didn't just survive their attempts, you rose above them, and in doing so, you revealed their weakness and your own greatness. If this message resonates with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment below to let the world know that you too are untouchable. Every share spreads the truth, and every comment strengthens our community of the chosen, the resilient, and the unstoppable. Don't just watch. Take your place among those who rise above the noise. Stay blessed always.